Hey everyone, Coach Lee here, looking to bring you another video to help you become the best ultra runner that you can be. And today I wanted to talk briefly about the treadmill. There seems to be a lot of information comes out this sort of time of year, or at least if you're from the UK or other areas which are going into winter at this point in time. A lot of information on can the treadmill be used as a viable training option, what's the difference between training outside and training on a treadmill, etc. And it seems to be, in my opinion, just creating a barrier to just allowing people to go and use a treadmill. You know, we're getting to this point now, and especially if you're an ultra runner where you might be focusing predominantly on trails, you might be getting to the point where some of these routes just aren't necessarily runnable consistently. When we start to see more snow, more ice, obviously less light and things like that, we just might not be able to utilize those routes safely and effectively. And certainly then when it comes to speed sessions, whether they are on the flat or whether they are on some form of gradient, again, running at higher speeds means that it is even more treacherous to be able to run over those kinds of terrain, or even on roads and flats if there is snow and ice. So straight away, the treadmill absolutely is a viable option to allow you to meet your training requirements, allow you to get close towards your goals for race day, and also can be used even as an element for specificity, i.e. trying to get some hill training in if you either don't have access to the hills or the particular weather at this time of year isn't allowing you to get on the hills you would normally be able to run on. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of the difference between what momentum is added by the moving belt on a treadmill. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of the different demands of running off-road compared to just running on a stationary belt, or not stationary, a moving belt, because they're negligible. If you're able to still get out for one or two of your runs per week on road or on trail and stuff like that, especially your easy runs or your endurance runs, where again you can take time picking your foot placement and stuff like that a little bit more compared to doing stuff like tempo and running intervals, then you're getting the specific demands of running on terrain, whilst then supplementing with the treadmill to get those other elements of specificity or improved fitness that you can't necessarily get when you're running outdoors. So obviously there's a few key types of workouts that we can sort of best utilize a treadmill for to stave off boredom of just moving on a stationary belt or stationary machine for a long period of time. And obviously if you look back to my previous video on different types of training runs, then we obviously can utilize the running intervals, the tempo intervals, and one thing I didn't talk about that kind of fits into both of those two categories anyway, depending on the duration of them, is hill reps. And the reason being I didn't talk about in that previous video is because we can do hill reps to try and develop VO2 max whilst working on climbing ability, i.e. keeping them shorter and sharper, or we can develop lactate threshold by doing hill reps for longer durations with sort of shorter recovery periods and stuff like that in between. But either way, we're still improving our ability to climb in different intensities, and obviously being able to sort of buffer that buildup of lactate. So the treadmill is ideal for those types of workouts, and especially if you can't get on your hills, you can't have access to hills, or you just live somewhere flat at any time of the year anyway. So even if it's not winter and you don't really have access to hills without driving for a couple of hours at a time, where you then maybe only get out once per week or once every other week on your long run, then absolutely, again, the treadmill can be a real useful tool to supplement that by getting out and doing some high gradient treadmill intervals, again, sort of 10, 12, 15% gradients and stuff. And even if it's doing hiking on the treadmill at those higher gradients, and that's still going to be beneficial to helping you get some element of specificity towards your goal event, because let's be real, most of us as recreational runners, when we're doing hilly ultras, we're going to be hiking or power hiking, whatever you want to call it, walking up those gradients. So again, if we're looking at specificity to enable us to get better at a specific thing, we have to do that specific thing. Then obviously walking on high gradients on a treadmill is going to help satisfy that as well. So I just wanted to do a quick short one on not being afraid to use the treadmill. Whilst yes, we don't necessarily want to use it for every single run of every single week, I definitely think there's a lot of fear mongering around utilizing it as a supplement to your normal training regime. But now I'm using it at the moment. I'm not near as much trail as I want to be, and certainly being in a little bit of a busy town, there's nowhere that I can get to that I can run consistent intervals without having to stop every 2 minutes to go over a road which is quite busy or a roundabout. but yeah, I've got a gym 10 minutes down the road, so I can run there as a warm-up, jump on the treadmill, do my intervals without any interruptions, and also making sure I'm hitting some decent intensity and decent pace. And then I can either walk or jog back as a bit of a cool down. So I'm absolutely utilising it over the winter period, and certainly once I go travelling to Southeast Asia next month, where again, depending if I'm somewhere like Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, again, running around the city might not be a viable option because it's actual chaos there. So again, treadmill is going to become my friend to allow me to still keep some consistency in training and access different levels of intensity, so that I'm trying to keep as good of a fitness as possible whilst I'm going around the world travelling. So that's the treadmill.
Oh. Handstand across the other one and lift 10.
What was that? What do I need to do?
You have to run across the top.
Run across the top.
Do handstands across the higher one.
Yeah.
And then you have to lift it 10 times.
Have to lift it 10 times. Okay. Maybe I'll just lift.
Yes. Whew. Quite sweaty.
Instructions of how to correctly lift as well.
Ah, nice. Safety first. I should time you. I think you were about 5 seconds. Well done.
Go for best effort, yeah?
Yeah.
Best effort. You're going to count me in.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
That one's heavier than the end one.
Maybe it's wetter.
Your turn?
No.
So, there you go. Warm up mid-run. Lifting some lugs. That's pretty cool. Let's get back to the task at hand, shall we? Of actually running. On you then. So we are running through a forest near Ringwood, which is where we're currently based at the moment. We've been here for about a month and a bit now.
Too long.
Too long, yeah. Obviously since we sold our house October, we've been homeless and nomading about, just killing time until we fly to Hong Kong on January the 16th, start our Southeast Asia travels. We're now managing to get a bit of a routine with training and lifting and all that sort of stuff, which is good. And we've got some lovely forest trail. So yeah, we're just out for probably between 5 and 6 miles today. And someone was asking a question about the different training paces and what they look like in real life. So if you think I've been talking to you over this video now quite comfortably with minimal pauses, that's your easy to moderate effort. You should be able to do complete sentences before having to take a breath. If you can't, you're probably going a bit too fast for that easy to moderate effort. So there's an example, real life. I don't think Jane can do that though.
No, I'm probably going too fast. But easy to moderate.
That's what happens when you train together as a couple, isn't it? So
one of them's always dying at the back.
Anyway, let's get back to running. The other thing that I want to talk about in today's video is just a little bit on specificity. And again, I touched on it with relation to the treadmill element of, if you want to get better at a particular attribute, you obviously need to practice that attribute. So if we're looking at getting better at running downhill, we need to expose ourselves to more descending. Not necessarily doing descending reps. Whilst that is an option, I would much sort of prefer and certainly recommend that you just focus on trying to get in more hilly routes where you are doing more up and down, so exposing yourself to descending that way. And especially if you can get it in on more runs than just your long run in a week, then obviously you're going to build up the ability and the ability to stave off that muscle damage by doing those just normal descents. Whilst yes, you can do them at varying speeds to get that different benefit, I don't think you need to be, smashing yourself down a hill and walking back to the top and doing it on the whole, unless you're really, really not confident. But even then, as again I've talked about in one of my other videos, graded exposure in terms of the sort of the steepness of the descent as well as the terrain, you want to start on those easier, less steep terrains, something like just grass or kind of maybe even just a little bit kind of muddy, rocky, but not slippy mud, if that makes sense, kind of dry terrain, and then expose yourself to more, rocky, loose rock, gravel, even sort of boggy mud and stuff like that might be a bit more slippy and slidey, and again start changing the steepness of those gradients. That's something you want to do over time. But what I wanted to really focus on for the specificity element was looking at trying to replicate your goal event as best as possible. Now, for most of us, especially in the UK but also further afield, we might not necessarily be able to achieve a running route with thousands and thousands of meters of elevation gain and certainly elevation loss in one singular run, like we might sort of see on race day, especially with more popularity over things like UTMB qualifying races around the world, such as UTS in the UK. You're looking at quite a lot of elevation gain, quite a lot of elevation loss. So unless you get out and do that route in its entirety, it's going to be very hard to replicate that in one singular run. So the first element of specificity first is to try and sort of hit the elevation change or elevation gain and loss over a whole week. And you could obviously build up to that over a series of weeks. You don't just go straight into the deep end, but exposing yourself to at least that level of elevation gain, elevation loss that you're going to experience on the route will at least help condition the legs, the mind, to what sort of muscle damage and soreness and stuff is created from that level of elevation, and also trying to sustain that for a period of weeks so you get your body more and more used to it. The other thing that I wanted to go through though was what we can call elevation change per mile. So what we're trying to do here is at least replicate the undulation. So whilst we might not be able to get the exact elevation gain, elevation loss in a singular runs, we can still potentially find routes that are nearby to us or slightly further afield that we can at least replicate the elevation change per mile, so that we're at least exposing our body to similar levels of undulation or up and down over the course of a training run. And seemingly if we can try and achieve the elevation change over a whole week, again we're starting to expose ourselves more and more to the specific demands of our event, even if they're not exactly specific. And so the way we calculate that elevation change is what we'll do is add the elevation gain in feet and the elevation loss in feet and divide by the distance in miles. Now again, I appreciate that's old school numbers, but again, because a lot of the bigger race distance tend to be in miles anyway, it's probably an easier way for you to be able to calculate the elevation change per mile of your actual goal event, utilizing that calculation, go out on some training runs nearby, and then obviously get the data from their elevation gain, elevation loss, divide it by the distance you run. You can start to then see if your training runs stack up against what the event demand is in terms of elevation change. So that's what I would look at to incorporate into my specificity phase of prep for an ultra. And you want to be looking at this sort of stuff in at least the last sort of 8 to 10 weeks before your taper period of incorporating this type of stuff. So that's the reason I wanted to put it in today, because as we go into the new year, obviously a lot of us might be doing kind of early spring, late spring races where you're getting into the kind of last 3 to 5 months of training. So if you want to be doing this stuff for at least 8 to 10 weeks, you're probably going to be looking at trying to incorporate this sometime back end of January, early February, something like that, ready for your goal race. And even if you've got one later in the year, summertime stuff, again, if you've got more time to train, you've also then got more time to incorporate that specificity element and sort of build up a bit more gradually and just get more exposure to the hills, because that's usually a big limiting factor for a lot of the runners that I work with, is just the lack of exposure to steep ascents and steep descents to just condition the legs more than anything, so they don't take as much of a battering on race day. So some food for thought there. Any questions on that, obviously just let me know. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, share it with any runners that you think may benefit to. Remember, if you want my free weekly coaching emails as well, which go really well with these videos, check the link in the description. There's a link in there. All you've got to do is hand over your email. You get a free ultra running guide as well for your trouble, and then I send out emails once or twice a week max, so you're not just getting bombarded by me every single day. If you want a little bit more accountability and guidance from myself, a bespoke program, then look at my online ultra running club. Again, link in the description to join in that. I'm going to take a break from recording next week for Christmas and all that good stuff, but I'll be back with another video in the new year. And as always, if anyone's got any questions or needs any help or assistance, don't hesitate to comment on the video or drop me an email to lee@ultramarathoncoach.co.uk. Hope you all have a great Christmas and an epic new year, and I'll see you all in January.